Good morning. This is March the 20th. We're very close to spring and we're having nice weather here. And it's also approaching the day of Purim when the Jews were in Persia and they should have gone home by then.
Yeah.
This leads us to what we were talking about last week that we would continue with today about them going into the land.
Mm-hmm.
We find that there was a great many of them that were afraid to go into the land, so they had to wander around for 40 years.
That's right.
Why?
Well, they died.
Why is it always so difficult to come into the land?
Oh,
There are more excuses for not coming in
it's terrible.
than coming in.
Look at all the Jews that live outside Israel today.
Yeah. So they weren't a nation yet. They were a people,
Mm-hmm.
but they weren't a nation because you have to have land.
Yeah, you have to have land and boundaries. And
That's right. All kinds of things have to be established to be a nation. So after 40 years of wandering, they came in. But there were only about 3,000 or 3 million of them. And even though this is a very small piece of land,
yeah,
they still were scattered by the time they got who was going to live where. And the land was divided up and they had boundaries for each tribe, 12 pieces of land.
well, they didn't have buses or trains.
No, and it was all donkey, ride, or walk.
Or camel.
Well, camel maybe, but they don't talk about that so much.
No, they don't.
There were more than 12 pieces of land because Manasseh was in two parts. He had two, they were sort of separated a little bit.
Yeah.
But basically 12, 13 pieces of land. Well, maybe it was just 12 because Levi didn't get land.
Yeah.
Levi got to live in certain cities, and then he was given land around the cities where he could grow some things and have cattle or so forth. So the people are in the land now. They have enemies that are around them, people that don't want them there.
You mean right now?
Then too.
Oh, then, yeah.
It just seems to be the way it is. There's a very close parallel to when Israel came into the land and settled and became a nation, like the Americans that were not called Americans before they came.
Yeah.
They were, I'm from England, I'm from Holland, I'm from Spain, I'm from
Yeah.
France, I'm from wherever they were from.
Mm-hmm.
There were some Mecklenburgs that came first from Mecklenburg.
Yeah.
I understand that it was about a year before the Pilgrims, the ones that called themselves Pilgrims,
Yeah.
up in Massachusetts.
Mm-hmm.
So they were arriving from all over Europe and maybe other places in the world, I don't know. And they weren't, the only thing that was similar was that they were all seeking some freedom.
Right.
And they had fled from situations that they didn't like.
Taxation and
Mostly taxation and prison for,
well, their faith too.
excuse me, yes, and their faith. Yeah, that was involved in it because that's the part. You want freedom from taxation, you want freedom from someone telling you what to do.
Yeah.
For every detail of your life. Does that sound familiar? So anyway, so there was some similarities.
Mm-hmm.
When they got to America, the land of where they are, is what is called America or the USA, they were faced with these, some of the Indians there were helpful and some were not
Yeah.
helpful. They had a lot. They had their share of problems. They had problems with finding enough food in the winter and building homes and all kinds of things. Now, the Israelites came into the land, and there were enough people defeated in various villages who didn't want them there that they were ran out of their villages or killed. And there's very few bones found, so they think that many of them fled.
Okay.
But maybe they migrated back in. I don't know. Anyway, the Israelites did have houses, some housing that they could move into.
Yeah.
Some of them may have lived in tents for a while, with their tents that they'd been living in. The climate is better, so that part wasn't so difficult, although I wouldn't want to live in a tent here in the winter, even in a rod.
The Bedouin do.
Yes, they do, and they've lived that way for centuries. So there's some similarities between how a nation is formed. There's a lot to get used to. You have to talk to people to find out how you're going to share this land that you've come to. And so eventually you had colonies in America, and that's what you had in Israel. And everybody was doing his own thing. And not even in a tribe where everybody coordinated. So they had these judges that would, leaders in each tribe, and they would have problems from the Ammonites or the Moabites or Edom, and they would rally other tribes to come help them fight them off.
Yeah.
So that kept them sort of related to each other. Because
They didn't really have a Joshua anymore.
No, this was after Joshua.
Yeah. Joshua was a leader over all.
He was a leader over them all, and they were more coordinated. And then Joshua, when he died, he gave a great speech.
He didn't really appoint someone like Moses appointed Joshua, but Joshua did not appoint.
No, he didn't. He appointed land and leaders for each land. So the nation still was not formed. It was just tribal. And then they had all these problems and these different judges, or we call them in English judges, but they were really chieftains.
Chiefs or leaders, yeah.
Leaders, yeah. The word judge in Hebrew covers anyone in authority. So the people get tired of everyone doing his own thing, because it creates clashes and it creates problems between groups because they don't know what the other guy's doing, and there's no coordination.
Well, there was jealousy sometimes of each other too.
Samuel was raised up as a prophet. He acted as a king and as a leader of more of the group, more of the tribes, because he made circuit route. He had a circuit where he'd go out.
He was the most like Joshua that had been since Joshua.
That's right. So when the people came to him and said, "We want a king," he felt that they were rejecting him.
Yeah.
I mean, he'd been doing all this stuff for him. He'd given.
Whoa, what's wrong with me?
But their complaint was, well, you have some sons that are going to take your place. You're getting to be an old man.
Yeah.
And these sons they're acting like Eli's sons.
Yeah.
Eli was kind of a main leader in some respects, because he was the head priest.
He was a high priest, yeah.
And his family didn't grow up properly. They did they were always doing what they weren't supposed to. And so the people see that Samuel's children are just a little bit like Eli's children, and they don't want to go through that again.
Yeah.
So they say we want a king. Well, one of the problems with this group of people, they were supposed to have God as their king, and they were forgetting God too much.
Oh yeah.
So they, you know, what would be a relationship for the people to God had become a religion.
Mm-hmm.
So they would go to Samuel, and we got this kind of problem, and he would go up on a high place and make a sacrifice and get a word from God,
Mm-hmm.
what they were supposed to do. But basically, they were not going directly to God.
Yeah.
They were not walking in faith that God had already given them promises. If you do what I say, you'll live. Your enemies will not do this. You don't have to be afraid of the enemies that are surrounding you, because he said they would have them.
Yeah.
He says, I can't drive them all out at once, or you would have the wild animals take their place. So they were not really making God king anymore.
Yeah, I guess so.
Why you think they might have been?
Well, no, it's just thinking before Samuel, you have people like Gideon who talked to God. Other people talked to God, but
Well, even Gideon, they were worshiping idols.
yeah, I know. He did talk to God.
But God sent an angel to talk to him,
Yeah.
and he got it started. God's the one that got it started, and then Gideon followed through.
Mm-hmm.
But immediately after, Gideon gets old, and the people, they don't have Gideon anymore. So now they're back to they didn't really have that strong relation individually with God. So he wasn't king.
They always
He
seem to
couldn't
be,
coordinate
be
them.
influenced by other cultures and other nations. I don't know why.
Well, just look at America.
Yeah.
You see why. We have a hard time as people.
Mm-hmm.
We have a hard time saying this unseen God can really be in charge. It's a walk of faith. This is why we're here on earth. He has given us the potential to become a human in his image. We were given choice. So we have to make choices that will actually become part of what he had in mind.
Mm-hmm.
But he's not forcing us. So we go through all these problems because we don't have the wisdom to know how to make a nation, how to do something with the earth that he gave us.
Yeah, some people wonder why there's problems on the earth, but it's because of God lets us make decisions and do things. He lets us go,
Yeah, and he lets us go to the point where we create problems, so we'll know that we're the ones that weren't responsible, and we called all the problems down on ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
We just talked about that this morning. I didn't know that at the time of Esther's time that the people had gone back to Israel.
I know.
But they didn't go back. Only 40,000 went back.
Yeah.
And so they virtually brought the problem on themselves. And so they wouldn't have needed to have a Haman or a Mordecai that didn't bow down to Haman if Mordecai had been in Israel.
Mm-hmm.
But see, God allows them to make the choices, and then they get into problems. Then they call out on him. He delivers them. Then they make a holiday and say, look what God did for us. And it's to help them remember that there is a God.
Yeah.
And that he's in charge.
Yeah.
So we need to make God king first before we get involved in making kings. Because we can make kings like having Moses and Joshua, and we still don't have faith. We're relying on someone or something instead of God.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the position they are in when they asked Samuel for a king.
Mm-hmm.
And Samuel warns him, you're going to get taxes.
Yeah.
It's going to be a burden to have a king.
Mhm.
Oh, we want a king. And God had made provision in the teachings and laws for a king. But he had a time in mind
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
may have been different than theirs.
Mhm.
However, their will was, we want a king.
Right. And he lets them have
And
it.
he lets them have it.
Mhm.
Now, it reminds me of the phrase, I let him have it. We are very willful people.
Yeah.
And it's our own will that gets us into trouble. And we do the right thing. We always have a real good reason for why we make the choices we do.
Yeah.
So we're right. And when we're right, we can't be wrong. And the only way we find out we're wrong is to see the consequences of those choices. Well, it seems like a laughing matter, but it isn't a laughing matter. And we've got that problem still with us today. And we will get through.
Mhm.
He will be king.
Yes, he will.
And my prayer is not that a Messiah will come. That's going to happen.
Yeah.
I have every confidence. I don't want to hold it back.
Yeah.
But we have to make God king first.
Mhm.
If we don't make God king first, we're still having the same problems they had when they went into the land.
Mhm.
And we're trying to live as one people.
Well, it's not really a real government unless it's connected with God.
That's right. So the pioneers of America knew that.
Mhm. Yeah.
And they didn't want a lot of different denominations dominating one or the other. So they just made it under God. So their idea of that no religion would be running the government was true. If you're just under God and you're connected to Him, there's no religion involved. The religion part comes in how you want to express your relationship to God.
Right.
And you can have all kinds of relationships. We, in Israel, many Jews realize that the Muslims, they claim to worship the same God. They even have, their laws are very, very
Mhm.
much and closely
yeah.
related to Israel. But it's how you interpret those laws and rules. And we're seeing that the same in America is why it's divided.
Mhm.
These people say, oh no, we can interpret it this way. These people say, oh no, we can interpret it this way. So then you have division. But who can change that? The King on high who gave the laws. It comes to us by our being related to Him. And He says, this is the way, walk in it.
Yeah. Mhm.
So we'll leave it there for now. And we can talk about a little bit more maybe in how they became a nation and some of the other things that happened
Right.
afterwards. But
Right.
I think this is really the crux of what good or bad government is. So have a good day.